Welcome to the Seven Figure CEO podcast, where we talk all things marketing strategies, business systems, personal development insights, and conduct interviews with successful CEOs and entrepreneurs. Learn the exact strategies on how seven-figure CEOs market and scale their companies with your host, Cris Rodriguez.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So I got to ask, is it double? Is that how you take your coffee up in Canada, or what is it?
So if you're from Canada or you've been to Canada, there's a coffee place up here called Tim Hortons, which is a little bit of like a cult following. I don't know if I'm one of those people, how people talk about like if they eat cilantro, it tastes like something horrid, right? And I eat cilantro and I think it's wonderful. But every time I drink coffee, all I taste is burnt bean water. And it doesn't really matter what I put into it. It's kind of like if you took popcorn kernels, burnt them, and then put water through them. It's just not really like I'll have it socially, maybe with an espresso, right? If we're in Vegas or something like that. But other than that, no, it's not really my thing.
Okay, well, then no doubles.
But they're double and triple super popular up here.
Yeah, I was in Canada for a grappling tournament like 15 years ago. That's when I was directing tournaments and went to go get coffee. And I'm like, I'll have, 2 creams and 2 sugars. And they were like, so you want a double? And I was like, no, I want 2 creams and 2. Just did not know the language. So Good to know. I won't ever offer to take you out for coffee.
No, we can have something else. It's fine.
Okay. Brad, I'm super pumped to have you on because you are my first official guest that is in a different niche of, different industry than the people that I normally bring on. And I clearly remember a couple of intensives ago when you came up and you spoke, and I was just really, really taken back. I was like, I got to make sure that I sit next to him during lunch. I probably should have paid you for the consultation that you gave me during lunch, but, always love hearing you speak. You're a wealth of knowledge. So why don't we just kind of let our listeners, kind of pull back the curtain of who you are, where you're from, and kind of where you're at right now.
Yeah. So from London, Ontario, Canada. It's not London, England, but it's just southwest of Toronto. Our head office for both agencies is in Tampa, but I married a Canadian. I am Canadian. My 3 kids are Canadian, so they're still here in the education system until they're all kind of off to post-secondary. I did a graduate degree in marketing. Marketing was always a huge passion of mine. I felt like it was a skill set that could always help in sales and anything else. Actually did my nursing degree. Worked at the bedside for about 10, 11 years. Absolutely loved it, but just with 3 kids and shift work, it's not really the perfect fit. So the wife was kind of like, hey, what's the next step going to be? Actually went and did private equity for 3 years. So I ran a number of call centers, clinical research companies, and things like that. And that's actually how Brett and I ended up meeting each other, was through a mutual client. And then I saw this really cool software that we know very, very well in our industry. And I was like, hey, that is super amazing, cool. Not quite finished, but super cool. And we decided to join forces. And 2 agencies later, we're having a lot of fun.
I love it. I love that software as well when it's not buggy, but that's a conversation for another day. So talk to me a little bit about like what is, clinic grower, and then what is agency growth. And, sometimes I don't know what the quote is, but something to the effect, when you chase 2 rabbits, you don't catch either of them. So, talk to me about how those started and, why the decision to start another venture with agency growth.
Yeah. So Clinic Grower is a medical marketing agency. So we do everything from SEO, website, paid media, traditional media. Brett comes from a television kind of radio background. We do specifically cosmetic and plastic surgery. So that's kind of like our big area of specialty. And it kind of works well with me, having been a nurse at the bedside, building practices over my time in private equity. And we had a lot of fun and a lot of success scaling that over $1 million. And what we found was, at least when it came to what is traditionally known as account managers, we call them client success in our agency, is we found that this hiring process that we went through for a Clinic Grower was almost like too good to be true, right? So we would post a position, we would have people applying to it remotely, because I mean, this was pre-COVID. And not just one or two candidates would be outstanding, but 7 would be outstanding. And we would pick the top person. And then you kind of felt bad because I'm Canadian. You got a little heart for people, right? And you're like, these other 6 or 7 people want a job. So at the masterminds intensives, I would reach out to other agency owners and I'd say, hey, do you guys need a amazing client success person? And by the time we had done our 3rd round of hiring, it was like, okay, there's a business model here, right? And I am one of those people where I'm old school, taught from my profs in business, where it's like you do what you do best. That's really, really important. And when we took a look at it and, we were deciding, is it a shiny object or is it something that's worth being monetized? What we decided was, as long as we were doing that service plus enhancing our own service. So, the team, when we go to do these placements, we also train, we also support, we also mentor. And what that does is it creates a cycle for at least our internal team of how do we get better, right? How do you raise the bar of excellence? So when agencies come to us and they have a problem, they're usually pretty open, as we all know, about like, hey, I have this problem. And not only are we doing the placements, but we're able to solve those problems for those agencies, along with, providing the win of giving somebody a career. And I think we've done about 75 placements in a year and a half.
Oh, wow.
And, I don't think that people should go and chase shiny things in their business. But in this instance, like I said, there was a massive value that could be added to Clinic Grower. It's a huge bonus for our existing team because they get bonused through that business model. But we get a lot of requests for, hey, do you do this position? Do you do that position? We just do that. That's agency growth team is just for account management.
I love it. I mean, as somebody that has a team of 30 and pretty much 50% of our team is, account managers or customer client success. We are constantly hiring for this position and it's, time consuming, it's expensive. And it could be very stressful not knowing where that kind of next rock star, is. So I love that you saw this opportunity. And I personally know a ton of people in our mastermind that, have successfully used your services, which, I think says a lot. I'm curious, you went med spa, which, the whole kind of terminology of blue ocean, red ocean, from what I've heard, could be a very red ocean niche. What do you think really has helped to set you guys apart to build a 7-figure agency in a very competitive industry?
I think part of it, just again, my opinion, is we're really focused on our avatar, right? I could tell you probably with a very defined column exactly who we work with, why we work with them, what's the size of their business, where are they located, what are they interested in? Because again, you're right, it's huge, right? It's huge, it's wide. I think the other thing is by doing that, so we call it avatar development. I know every other business does it differently. Persona would maybe be the other word, or client profile. By doing that, it also forces you to focus on what are the biggest problems that business is facing. So one of the things that we realized when we did shrink down and really specialize was these doctors were super busy, super successful. They got billboards. I mean, you're in Tampa, you see them all the time too. But when we were inside the practices doing a lot of our market research, it was amazing how much the phone was ringing. And I asked a question at one point to one of the doctors in San Antonio. I said, well, what happens when that call goes to voicemail? And he's like, oh, we call them back. And in my head, I was like, I just said it really quietly and he got real like attention super fast. I said, well, do you ever think that they're calling the next practice? And he turned around, he goes, would you solve that for me? And I said, I mean, I build call centers. It's a philosophy around. And I was like, yeah, I would want to do a call center. I'd want to call it a booking center because obviously that's the purpose of the outcome. And that's, almost a year and a half later, we have 17 agents inside of the booking center that we do for various, probably about 35 of our 52 clients are using that service. And when you can get their buy-in to that person isn't literally just waiting for you to call them back. They're probably going to the Google searches, we know, right to the very next business. It's probably no different than your than your martial arts studios. That speed to lead, that first impression, whether we're using an AI assist or you're doing it, directly with somebody, that's money calling your business, and you kind of have to make the decision of how much of that money are you going to let through the colander or the funnel.
Yeah, I mean, we, had very similar questions asked, from our clients as well. It's, just I never ever thought that I would, have a call center or a booking center in my agency. But, when you start working with clients, you see the other needs and the other problems that they need solved. And when you're getting them a ton of leads and they can't keep up with that lead flow, being able to handle that for them is huge. You had just kind of mentioned something about AI assists, and I'd love to know, where do you see, and let's just, kind of talk about what we do, which is more of a booking center, kind of slightly different than a call center. How do you see AI impacting this, in your business and in the industry all around?
Yeah, so I'm maybe more of the pessimistic old boomer here. I don't really think of it as AI. I think of it as intelligent automation. And that's what I say to people all the time. I mean, I don't really know that these things are decision-making workflows and mind maps and things like that. So I tend to say inside of my agency, let's not ignore it because it's important, but let's also not overhype it to what it's not. And even in the private equity days, we were using automations with some of the softwares that we're aware of. And what's really kind of been very compelling in at least our market, which is patients wanting to book appointments with cosmetic and plastic surgeons, is the intelligent automations are fantastic up to a point. And it's when you stop answering a question, when it gets fumbled, when it gets lost, people actually get quite frustrated. So the example is my 6-year-old has only really ever grown up with an Alexa in his room, right? So when Alexa doesn't add the right song, he starts yelling at it like it's a real person, right? And he'll say, "No, I said," and I'm like, "Jay, like, just give it a minute. Just give it a minute to register what you're trying to add, or he'll be too fast to it, right?" So what we often call it, for our clients, we call it AI cubed, which is basically like we're going to use that artificial intelligence, that intelligent automation. We're going to mix in really important messaging that keeps that person engaged, but we only know that we have a finite amount of time before that person probably either gets tripped up or loses interest. And that's where we call it an actual individual AI, comes in to pick up that conversation. Because those patients are probably talking about something quite private, something important. I think, will some of the software take over, hey, I need to pay my electricity bill? Sure. With some of the other stuff, is it taking over? Probably not.
I very much understand the kid and Alexa. My 3-year-old knows how to use Alexa, which is just like, it blows my mind that, kids that young know how to use it. I know my feelings when I'm calling Bank of America and trying to talk to somebody and, say like speak to an associate and, they say English or Spanish, like you get super frustrated. So it was interesting, once ChatGPT kind of became more well-known, all of a sudden you're seeing all these companies state that they use AI, and what they're really just doing was they were already using it in forms of automation, so I'm interested to see where it goes as these companies are able to spend more money and invest more money into making the product better. But I think there's some people that are like, oh, it's here, and I don't think it's there yet. I've seen and heard some of the conversations, and I'm like, it is so obvious you are talking to not a real human being. And like you said, there's a lot of frustration that can come out of that. So,
and I think different generations, again, avatars are going to deal with this technology in a different way. I mean, I think millennials and Gen Z are probably going to be a lot more adoptive, but I mean, like, we're for at least our side of the business, we're still talking a lot of the time to patients over the age of 25. Again, they have specific questions, they have specific needs. And every time that we do trial, any of these kind of things, I mean, again, they work up until a certain point, but honestly, it's usually about 45 to 90 seconds where we're starting to sense that person's smart enough to pick up like, hey, you're either thinking too hard or the response doesn't make sense. So the funniest thing we ever saw was we were at a trade show, and there was a dental marketing company that said, "Hey, we have this great AI chatbot," and I was like, "Wonderful." I was like, "Do you offer Invisalign for straight teeth?" And it goes, "Yes, we do." And I said, "Great. How much is Invisalign?" And it goes, "Yes, we do." And I was like, "Okay." So I think there's different. If you've trained an AI agent like Dialogflow or others like we have, it's really important to understand what are called entities and intents. And I think again, it's intelligent for sure, right? It's incredible what it can do, but I don't know that it's like what everyone's thinking it is right now.
Yeah, I get it. Well, the name of the show is Seven Figure CEO, but it's really about having clarity, executing on that, clear vision. And then once we execute, we get data, so then we can optimize. And I really kind of fell in love with this acronym that I created because I am very much of the ready, fire, aim mindset. And, ready is like getting clarity, firing is execution, and then aiming is that optimization. So I'd love to kind of unpack some questions that are inside of each of those categories. And the first one on clarity is just, and let's, if you want to focus on both or just one company, completely up to you. But what is the vision, right? The vivid vision, as Cameron Herold says in Double Double, that you have for, your business?
So the beauty of Facebook and the internet is every 23-year-old or even 19-year-old, I should say, in their mom's basement now thinks they can run a digital marketing agency. So one of the cool things about that, as we understand from the downside, is some people aren't as successful as we are at running campaigns and clients and everything else. I've really started to think, at least for our agency, are we a marketing agency or are we evolving into, with the call center, like more of a patient acquisition firm, right? So that clients are coming to us now, not necessarily just interested in the billboard or an ad, but having unique problems that we have resources, skills, experience, and a history with solving. And I would anticipate that over time, again, every time a client expresses a need, I don't want to chase solving that just because it can be shiny. But if all of my clients have that challenge, it makes a whole lot of sense. So one of the other things that we've started doing is we call it a patient concierge or a virtual patient concierge. Some of our doctors have a real hard time in their market getting someone who's affordable to show up to work every day, to get to their desk and to do their tasks. And again, because we're very good at hiring and we have a large talent pool of people internationally, what we can say is, okay, well, is that a service that you would like us to be able to provide to you on a fractional basis? So from a clarity standpoint, we do 2 C-levels a week. Bref and I meet on Mondays uninterrupted, Fridays uninterrupted, and that gives us the opportunity to kind of talk about what we're hearing from clients, what our teams, kind of progressing up to us. I would say he's a lot more of the I want to chase, every opportunity and make money. But I kind of always have looked at business as you can either choose speed or accuracy. It's hard to do both unless you're an absolute at that expert level. So he's my speed, I'm the accuracy. And a lot of the time what we're doing is we're piloting things to see, again, does it make financial sense? What are the pitfalls? What are the downsides? What else do we need? And some of those are wildly successful, and we've been fortunate that a lot of them have been. And then other times, things haven't been, and you just move on.
I mean, I love the concept that you built the machine that builds the machine. I mean, right? Agency growth is the machine that is helping to build, clinic grower. And I was recently speaking in Orlando a couple of weekends ago, and we hosted a boot camp for owners. And we usually do like huge events, 300, 400, 500 people. And we got some feedback from some of our clients that they missed kind of more of those intimate events. So we hosted a 2-day event, but the sole focus was on leadership and staff development. And I think many business owners underestimate the importance of developing a machine that allows you to bring on rock stars. And I know, it definitely did for me, because this is such a main focus, right? I mean, you guys are constantly interviewing and recruiting and placing team members in other businesses. What have you found is kind of, some of the best strategies to get buy-in from your team, whether that's the team at Clinic Growers, whether it's, recruiting for other agencies and placing them in. How do you get buy-in from your team? Because the one thing we don't want to have is a high churn for our team, right? Having high churn for your clients stinks. Having high churn for your team is even worse. So what have you kind of found works best?
So we kind of have it as like a little pyramid, right? With 3 foundations that really just rotate over and over again. And this, I think, just came from really good foundational education I had in my undergrads. We call it compensation, motivation, and training, right? And a lot of the time they're interlinked, right? They're interconnected. People think of compensation sometimes as money, right? It's always money. And it's like, actually, it could be time off. It could be a perk, a title, right? It could be some type of continuing education program. But almost everyone that comes into any of these programs, I mean, they're going to be uniquely motivated, right? They're going to probably have a request for compensation. The training is the part that usually I would say is pretty consistent. It's going to be dynamic in terms of you have a very large pool of available resources for them to pull from. But I think when you come at it from that approach, rather than just what do you want, a lot of the time they can't tell you, they don't know, right? So you put them through things like Colby Predictive Index. You spend time getting to know them through virtual coffees, through team building exercises. And what our management team is trained to do, which again is a whole other topic of exhaustive development, is the management team. They're constantly, don't tell my team, they're constantly assessing and picking apart these little nuances, things that people say, don't say, and then coming back on a weekly level 10. And one of the IDS items that we have each week is team, right? Like what are we seeing? What are we hearing? What do we need to be anticipating? We recently had to create a compensation adjustment policy because people are asking for raises. And we were like, okay, well, what does that mean? Right? Like how do we fairly evaluate for everybody? I think a lot of the time a good nursing analogy is we're just trying to keep a pulse on our business in terms of what's going on a regular basis. So whether we're in the weeds, whether we're looking at it from 30,000 feet, I just feel like I need to kind of know what's going on. It's just like a touch point.
You said something that really resonated with me, and it was that oftentimes team members don't know what they want. And I'm in a coaching program with Dan Martell, and one of the questions that I had asked him, because I was personally struggling, I have an in-person model here, and I was personally struggling with, there's some days I just don't want to come into the office, and I feel bad not coming into the office if my team is in the office. So I said, how do I overcome that? And if you follow Dan Martell and see his stories, like he's constantly out and about doing, things that you wouldn't necessarily think somebody at his level would have the time to do. And I said, how do I reframe my mind on overcoming this, like, just issue that I'm creating that, I have to be in the office? And he said, my team doesn't care if I'm working. They don't care if I'm in the office. Because one of the questions we ask them are, what are your 1 and 5 year goals? And if I know what your 1 and 5 year goals are, and I can help you get there, that's all they care about. So I did this exercise with my leadership team. And I said, I want you to sit down and think, where do you want to be in 1 year? And where do you want to be in 5 years? Every single one of them said that it was one of the hardest things that they've ever done. And I just think that, it's interesting that oftentimes as entrepreneurs, we're very goal oriented and motivated in that way. So we sometimes maybe assume other people are, but it's just kind of interesting that a lot of people don't know where they want to be in 1 to 5 years. And doing that really opened my eyes to what was most important to them, which helped me kind of create, just like you were saying, the compensation aspect, the training aspect, to ultimately get them where they want to be. So I love the triangle. Big fan of using shapes.
Yeah. One of my life coaches earlier in my career, I can try to remember exactly what he would say. He said, some people are creating a mindset. Some people are maintaining a mindset. and some people it's not even on their radar.
Mm.
And I think that I always try to think of that too through this process of like, I'm maintaining a mindset that I'm very happy that I have worked hard to get. Other people I'm encountering are creating one. And then some people, like, it's not even on the radar. They don't even know what we're talking about, right? They would go to Tony Robbins or some other thing, and they'd be like, what are all these people talking about, right? Like, what are they trying to get to achieve? And you're right, entrepreneurs, we're weird beasts. We're wired totally different than other people. We take risks that no one else probably would even contemplate. But yeah, that's what we're striving for our teams a lot of the time is what can we do to just get that, wouldn't even say an inch better. It's just get that deeper insight. And then how do you use that?
Yeah. I'd love to just kind of unpack this a little bit more. There was something you said that, people started asking for raises. So you guys needed to figure out some form of a compensation plan. I personally, when my team started to get a little bit larger, did not want to have this constant conversation of I want to raise. So I tried to implement this kind of black and white. If you're a rep, you get this much. If you're a specialist, you get this much. If you're a manager, you get this much. And it did not really work because there were people that not all the reps were created equally. Not all the managers were created equally. Not all the specialists were created equally. So, can you maybe kind of unpack when you say like, reassessing the compensation plan? What did that, kind of look like for you? Without, going into too much detail.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, I still don't think it's a finalized, finished, polished product. But what we noticed was obviously as inflation was starting to eat into everyone's situation, right? We were starting to get more and more of those requests. And same thing, struggled with how do you quantify, especially because our team's largely virtual, different jurisdictions, countries, currencies, jobs, tasks, all that other stuff. And one of the things, again, I kind of reached out to an old coach of mine and I was like, hey, how have you dealt with this? And he's like, I never found a good answer. I can't be any help. And I'm like, damn it. Right. And
at least he was honest.
Yeah, I was talking to my dad, and my dad's a retired union guy, worked in the like kind of beer and liquor industry his entire career. And he was like, well, to me, it's pretty simple, right? He's not a big business guy, but he's like, you can't give them money that you don't have. And I said, okay. When I started thinking about that, and I probably went back with it for a week, and I was like, he's right, right? So we kind of basically formed a policy that was, again, triangle, right? Because it kind of fit in, a lot of triangles fit into larger things, but it was, I think we have it worded as, how are you helping to increase revenue, right? Because then that frees up money that I can have available to meet your expectations, right? How are you decreasing expenses, right? So, that again frees up money that I can have available for what you're asking for. And then the third thing was, how are you freeing up my time? Because as we know, as C-level entrepreneurs, right, your time is massively valuable, right? We can choose to do 70 hours a week, or we can choose to do 40 plus 30 hours with our family. And that time for me right now is literally priceless because I have three children under 10. So I also think it forces the mindset of your team to ask themselves good questions because, okay, I understand you want to raise, but where's that coming from? Right. So one of the things that we have done, and this was a big step for Bref especially, was we've started sharing with the entire team our top line revenue number. How much are we earning per month, right? And obviously, I think hopefully everyone's smart enough to know that that top line revenue is not just flowing into a bank account. We're sitting here, enjoying the whole amount. But most of them, most of them are, okay, say profit margin is 10, 4.5 to 10% at best. They're like, okay, right? Like, hey, we've got, 45 individuals, so one of the things that we've done too is, we know there's times of the year where it's a little tougher around Christmas and stuff like that. So the Philippines, as you know, South Africa, they kind of do like a 13th month. That's something we've looked at implementing. We obviously have tons of incentives for upsells, referrals, testimonials, things that are really valuable to us to be able to use in our sales and marketing engine. I think, again, we're still looking to refine that. But I think it was an easier decision to go this route with those three options than it was to simply say, hey, at 2 years, everyone gets this amount. And again, like we talked about before, we've been playing a little bit more with time off. We've been playing around a little bit more with continuing education as perks rather than just bottom line salary.
Yeah. I love it. We've implemented something similar into our martial arts school. And prior to implementing it, I sat down and didn't, showcase what the profit was, but I did show them line by line what the expenses were. And the look on their face was they had no idea, and oftentimes they don't. So the way that, it works for them is, the better the company is doing, the more opportunity they have. So, I love that mindset. You were talking about time, right? It's the most valuable thing for you. What does your day-to-day look like? Just from wake up to once you're done with work, and then after work, what does that look like?
So I'm a really, I think it's, again, coming back down to the the nursing element. I'm a really big time blocker. So earlier in my career, I ran a large fertility practice. My mornings were doing clinical work. My afternoons were doing business. And a lot of the time I take that same approach. It's where my comfort zone is. So I'll usually start my day here in the office around 7:30. So I'm usually up around 6, family time, breakfast, let the dog out, shave if I need to or anything like that. And then usually at 7:30 for about 90 minutes, I'm cycling through agency meetings, right? About half of our team works 4 a.m. Eastern to noon, just because they're on different time zones. And I'm really, again, as a shift worker, I don't think you do your best work at 5 o'clock in the morning that you've been up the entire night for. So we kind of have that team cycle through. My operations manager, my client success team, they're there with me during, kind of usually 30-minute meetings. I get through usually those three sets, and that's usually when I'll take some client calls. I'll do some coaching. My usually afternoon around now is usually, especially on Tuesdays and Thursdays, it's fully blocked out. So I have the opportunity to say, hey, this is what I'm choosing to put into my calendar. And the kids aren't back in school for another week. But basically during the summer, my day is usually done at around 4:35. So I get a little bit more flexibility. But as soon as they're back in school and that doorbell rings 1,000 times, which they just can't help themselves from doing, I'm usually on a timer of about 20 more minutes, and then I know my day is done.
Has it always been that way for you? I think we often see in the entrepreneurial world that, at the end of the day, the business never ends, right? Like there's always going to be, more. And I think we see a lot of this, a hustle mentality and work 12, 14, 16 hours. Have you kind of always been this way, or is this mainly been a shift since you started a family?
I would say more of a shift as I started a family, right? So I was always that kind of 9 to 5 person, right? I would leave the hospital, the scrubs came off. It was like you were the superhero, and then you're just the regular person, right? You just changed the clothes. Again, you might have had puke, urine, blood, any other sort of stuff on your scrubs. I think the benefit for me is my partner, my wife, is that great stabilizing force. So she'll sit there and say to me, hey, the phone's in your hand at 8 o'clock rather than reading books. And I'll go, you're right, phone down. Saturday, she'll say, hey, what 2 hours do you need? Because usually I love to put in at least an hour to 2 hours just on my own time, no one bothering me on a Saturday, and we'll organize that around what the kids are doing and things like that. So she's kind of the CEO of the house, or the chief operating officer of the house. And I think without that, yeah, I could do 16-hour days every single day and it wouldn't bother me. But the reality is I chose to have a wife, a family, I have extended family. And I think a lot of the time you kind of, it depends on where you want to go. I think most of us that watch the mustache guy that everyone likes to talk about all the time, like there's a price that comes to that. It means that they're probably not having any kids, and they probably don't want that, and that's perfectly fine. We chose that we did want that, so that comes with as much responsibility as my businesses. So my wife, there's an old Oprah line that she always quotes. She goes, like, we're in love with each other, we're not in love with our kids. Right. So same time, making time for the relationship is super important. You also got to make time for the kids, but they're going to leave me at some day, and I'll still be left with that relationship that I have to maintain. So the business, it will leave me someday. I will sell it. Something will happen to it. That's inevitable. And I'll still be left with the relationships that I have.
I love it. And I think it's so important to make sure you understand who you're listening to, who your mentors are. I've purposefully sought out mentors that have success in all of the areas of life, not just, man, I'm killer at business, so love that share. Talk to me a little bit about, do you consider yourself a numbers guy? We know that stats are important as, the COO of operations, and especially with what you guys are doing at, the agency growth and hiring, what numbers are most important to you, right? And in the EOS world, we say, hey, if you're going to you're stranded on an island, you get one report a week. What are you wanting to see on that report?
Yeah, for me, it's simple. It's margins matter, right? So for me, I want to know what the margins are. If I can get more than one number, that would be great, right? But if I could get the number on on the single agency, top and bottom, then at least as long as I anticipate or know where the top line is at, right? Now I know where the movement needs to come from, right? Now I can make decisions on where do I need to widen or compress that margin. And the downside I've always just seen with other small businesses is they're usually about 2 bad decisions away from running into cash flow problems, most of the time because they're thinking and feeling about what their pricing should be rather than knowing what it should be, right? And if you have a good handle on your expenses, you understand where your revenue is at, then you know what that margin is, right? And that's the difference that you live in. And if it's too small, you just don't have the capacity to do the things that you want to do. On the flip side, if it's too much, you're probably going to have some team issues, right? You're going to have the churn at different levels so it's part of preserving that margin, understanding how to share it, understanding how to flex it and grow it. And I think that, yeah, if I had that one number, to me, that's probably the number that I would need the most in order to decide what I'm doing tomorrow to further the business.
I had no idea about margins until I got into the agency world. And, when people ask me like, why did you price what you priced? It was like, well, that's what my competitors are pricing. And I wanted to be a little bit below them so we could be more, cost effective, and, definite levels to the game. So I love that you brought up margins. Let's kind of shift to marketing, because that's what, I know you're kind of shifting more towards the patient acquisition firm versus a digital marketing firm. But what types of marketing are you guys currently doing to grow clinic growth? What does the marketing mix look like? What's kind of been working best for you?
I actually had a younger agency owner take some time on my calendar, because I know you give time on your calendar to the same group. And this was a question that came up earlier today that I had on my lunch meeting. And I said, I can't answer that for you because it's not one thing. It's, you've got to look at all 7 or 8. All 7 or 8 are going to work at different times of the year for different things. If you're not doing all of them, you're never going to appreciate why they're important. But when you're not doing them, you're probably going to feel it. It's just going to be an absent feeling. So we were still talking about like direct mail, right? And this is the fun thing in the marketing world. Everyone still is like, oh, everything's got to be digital. And it's like, no, there's lots of things that still work super effectively. The speed is different, right? Understanding the skill set, right? That old kind of like long form sales copy, Dan Kennedy style stuff still really, really works well. But yeah, I mean, listen, it's instant gratification. We can just fire up a Facebook ad, get it to an audience, make a crazy offer, but then you're also left with all of the expectations that come along with that, right? So what's working best for us? We've kind of been following the model that a lot of other agencies have, where we've got a strong social media presence. I am a huge fan of lead magnets. I'm a big educator. That's a passion of mine. So they serve 2 purposes. 1, I'm getting content out there for people, and 2, they're giving me their information so that I can kind of prospect the hell out of them.
Ethical bribe.
Yeah, exactly. An ethical bribe. I think speaking events, I think a large part, what we have found is going through that patient, or what we call client acquisition, but also relevant to patients too, is I think there's a reason why our doctors love referrals, because someone else has done the work for you, right? Someone else has built the confidence, giving you the certainty that you should go somewhere. And I think like late last year, we really focused on, if we start to generate more referrals internally from our business, how much easier would our job become? And actually, that's the beautiful part, is most of the people we have on our podcast are clients or people that know us through clients. And if only one person knows you, they can only have potentially maybe one or two conversations about you to other people. If 1,000 people know you, just think of all the conversations that are coming back towards you. And I think that that's kind of one of those things, is like, as we get older, because Brett and I are both 42, how do we work smarter, but just as effectively? And I think a lot of it is, we do Facebook, we do Google, YouTube, the podcast, but those referrals, like and until you really know, and I'm sure it's the same in your business, they're just so much different. They're better to work with. The expectations already been set. Now that you have it, you would never want to give it away.
Yeah, we obviously work with a lot of martial arts schools, and we'll ask, do you have a referral program? And they say yes. And it's like, well, when was the last time you got a referral? They have no idea. Or you ask, do your students know that you have a referral program? I would, take a referral lead over any other type of lead every day of the week, twice on Sunday. And I think that's why the customer experience is just so important. And it's just, I think oftentimes in the agency world, it gets put on the back burner of what's happening with fulfillment, because everybody is so focused on sales. We see this in the martial arts industry as well. We use a terminology called the 3 R's. There's only 3 things you got to do in your martial arts school. You got to recruit new students, you got to retain the ones you have, and you got to increase your revenue. And it's like, everybody wants to focus on, recruiting, when there are other ways for you to be able to increase, your revenue as well. It's not just through, getting the new students. What does, you said you're 42, right? Which I thought you were in your 30s. So.
No.
What is the next level? And it's such a cheesy term, I know, right? Like, crush it, next level. But what does that look like for you? You've got 3 boys under 10, you said, which is, man, you guys got to be busy. But what does that look like for life and business, if you had to say, like, next level?
See, this is interesting. Maybe it's gonna, bore people, right? But it's I've been at the highest level, and it was great, and I enjoyed it, and nothing's ever going to top it. So I'm very transparent with everybody. Running that fertility practice for 5 years, I'll never hit another high like helping a couple have a baby. And I got to do that over 2,000 times. I think the number was just shy of 2,500 in the 5 years that I did it. So like, anything I do can never hit that. Like, there's just, like, for me, and again, it'll be different for different people. I think if you have been through that journey, you understand how impactful it is. But running this business has been great. It's been wonderful. It's massively profitable. But like, I already had that accomplishment in my career, and it's not that I'm retired or I'm hanging it up, but I think at that point I was like, I understood that that's the level, right? And I can do other things. I love giving back my time. I love educating. I spend a lot of time in the garden and doing, I have an orchard and stuff like that. But yeah, maybe because I'm getting old and gray, the day's gone where I have a good amount of money in the bank. I have a beautiful family. I wouldn't say that I'm set, but I would say that, like, I don't have to work as hard as other people might to accomplish the same thing. So I think the level for me is probably where I spend most of my time, which is, how do I make my team, right? How do I make this agency that I'm running really operate without me? And hopefully it never needs to. But I see the ability for all of our team to skill up, right, if they want to. And if they want to get to this level faster, then that would be amazing. I mean, I would love to have gotten at this level at 32. I got here at 42. But if I could, somehow help someone else get there, if that was important to them, fantastic. If not, money is nice if you have it. We all appreciate it. But like I said, there's a lot of miserable rich people out there. and they're still just chasing more money.
Yeah, and I think they're thinking that the money gives them the freedom, and not if you haven't set up your life that way.
No.
As we wrap up here, because this is called Seven Figure CEO, and you are the COO, and I have very strong opinions about partnerships. I think partly it's because I'm an only child, also partly because I'm a high D on the DISC assessment. I don't really play well with others, but what are some of the things that you believe make the CEO COO relationship between you and Bref work so well in your partnership?
I mean, respect is huge. I think everyone has to come. It's just we treat it really no different than a relationship, right? So both of us have been married for a long time with the same partner for a long time, and I think every day you realize that that's something you have to invest time into, right? So the moment you take it for granted, it's the moment it starts to come and pull away from you. That's why I think for us, regardless of where we are, what we're doing, we have those twice a week sync ups. I think we've defined our roles very specifically with a line through the middle, which has helped. I think we also respect each other's opinions in terms of both of those opinions sometimes will align, sometimes that they won't. It's give and take. And whether we call ourselves brothers or family or partners or however that works out in the business, I think taking a lot of lessons from our marriages to a business relationship has made a lot of sense, because I know when I need to give him something. He knows when he needs to give it in return. We can also say something without getting fiery and abusive with language and stuff like that. We can simply say, like, I'm really upset right now with that decision, right? I think we've worked hard on those types of things, but I think it's also understanding and valuing that cumulatively we bring something to the table that individually neither of us could accomplish. And I think that was the big thing that we had that initial partnership conversation about. We also spent about a year just kind of seeing if that partnership would work rather than just diving in head first. But I think we understand now that we wouldn't be where we are as individuals. We are because it's a partnership. And I think we also understand where it's continuing to grow to. But it doesn't mean it's easy. The benefit is you get two heads accomplishing an output. But that also means you have two personalities that are often in conflict with where you want to go.
I love it. I clearly remember one morning when my wife and I ran the martial arts school together, and I was CEO and she was COO, and we were working in our offices in the morning, and we met for lunch, and sat down. Oh, like, what did you work on this morning? And she was like, I was building out the job description for our after school counselor position. And I was like, oh, that's exactly what I was doing as well. And I think you saying, understanding what our roles are and drawing that in the line is so important. And I also think we naturally have a tendency to kind of become close to people that are like us and have similar skill sets. And oftentimes people choose partnerships in that way. And that's like not the way to do it. So it's great that you really spent time on, seeing, is this going to make the most sense? And can we bring our skill sets together?
Yep.
Brad, any additional nuggets of wisdom, for somebody that's listening and is, wanting to hit that 7-figure, whether they're, the CEO of a 7-figure business or the COO of a 7-figure business, any additional nuggets of wisdom or insight that you'd like to share with them?
No, I mean, I think I said it at the beginning, and I'll probably come back to it. I think very strongly in business, people don't focus on doing what they do best. And I think that when you really become a specialist, and you can be a specialist in a lot of different areas, right? Like, again, I'm very blessed to be, I wouldn't say expert, but knowledgeable in a lot of different areas. I think asking yourself that question over and over again, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Is this where I'm most, valuable, resourceful? I think that probably helps a lot of small businesses because, again, that vanity kind of creeps in. We all have it, right? Someone else is doing this, someone else is having success here. But again, that's great. That's what they're doing, right? You do you, right? That's fantastic. And there doesn't need to be a jealousy that's there. Because at the end of the day, if you're making this much and I'm making that much, Our cost of living could be totally different. Our situations could be
Mm.
different. Our debt could be different.
That Lambo could be rented. The jet could
Yeah.
be rented.
Yeah, and listen, if those things are important to you, then strive for them, right? I just don't fit in a Lambo. I barely fit in a Ferrari. So, as a 6'4" guy, that's just never been something that but I mean, you know me, I love my watches, right? So
Yep.
for me, that's my vice. And for someone else, it could be something else. So I think far too often we're quick to judge people and their situation. And it's like, hey, if that's why I said, like, some people are creating mindsets, some people are maintaining. I'm interested in maintaining my mindset. I have it, I love it, I'm happy with where it's at. If you want to go and create it, and that's what's going to help you get to that maintenance level, then go do it.
I love it. Well, Brad, thanks so much for being my first non-martial artist guest on 7-Figure CEO. Appreciate you spending some time with us, and we'll see everybody on the next episode.
Thank you.